Dumelang. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Monges Makalima. My work is to evoke excellence in others. A lot about what I can tell you about myself you can find on Google, but I can tell you three things that are an essence of me. I'm an African, I'm a leader, and I'm an elder. I'm an African not because I'm born on this continent, but because I don't wait. I wake up every morning asking, how do I put Africa in the center of the world where it's supposed to be? And as a result, I travel across the world. Well, thank COVID, I don't have to yet, but technology has helped, helping leaders develop consciousness and accountability. And I travel across the world, helping to bring what's best in Africa to the world and what's best in the world to Africa. I say I'm a leader. It's an identity I'm ready to take on all the time because I don't wait for things to happen. I make things happen. I get in trouble quite a lot. A smart man once said to me, if you're a leader and you're comfortable, you're probably not leading, you're following someone else. I'm not that guy. As a result, I've initiated a couple of things, and if you Google, you'll find it. And if you're listening very clearly, you'll find one of them a little bit down the line in my conversation. But it's things that really want to help people. Now, that's me on the screen there. If you've seen in the center there, I was essentially in my leadership for the first time, sitting on my grandmother's table, and she never allowed anybody there, but because I was one of the first people to degree, she kind of allowed me to study leadership there. And if you see that picture on the top right-hand corner, it's essentially me in my other grandmother's house and second year of leadership. This is about more than 30 years ago, about 30 years ago. And that seat that I'm sitting in, it folds out. So that's essentially also my bed. But my grandmother lived in a very big house. So, but that was my corner of the world. Fast forward 12 years later, I'm sitting at the University of Stellenbosch and I'm studying leadership, and I've been working with people. And then all of a sudden I'm required to study leadership coaching to actually really coach. So I've been coaching, I've been doing it very well. And then there's this white gentleman sitting in front of me, and for some reason I can't coach him. And I'm asking myself, what's happening? Now, Kasotho or Kastswana, he had a big shadow. Because it was not my skill, it was not my knowledge. I was very good at that stuff with other people except him, which led me to write a master's thesis that opened the story to this conversation, because I asked, does it matter if you're black or white? Later on, as I was presenting this research to a psychological society somewhere, if you're a researcher here, you would know the feeling you get, the so what feeling after you've done all the masters and you're doing the presentation, and then you go like, yeah, so what? But then this gentleman asks the question, raises a hand and says, sorry, sir, at a conference, I don't choose people based on their race or their gender or their language. And I said, yes, you're correct. Because in his age, he was around 53, 54. And in terms of my research, he is in the space where those people in my research, they don't care about age, gender, and language. He used the word, though, that leads me to what I'm going to talk about now. He said, I use credibility. I look into credibility. I said, oh yeah, that's my so what. And that became my PhD. And that led to me talking a lot about leadership credibility, which I'm going to talk to you about. And I'm going to share in the next 10 or so minutes a little bit about what are some of the things that actually give you leadership credibility that might actually say to you what we learned about leadership all along is wrong. So the data comes from about 35 questions. I've worked with leaders, about 70 or so across the country. At that time, that's already a few years ago, 60 responses to a questionnaire, 499 leaders, clients across the country, as well as about 95 coaches. So you can see I ask a lot of questions. And in fact, I'm gonna ask you now to actually help me with this research. So whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Facebook, or just where you're sitting, and then you can give me the data afterwards, because there's more data than this. It's coming from people like you. I'm going to ask you to answer 2 questions for me. I would like for you to write down 3 things, well, 3 words that describe how you choose a painter, a plumber, a lawyer, a doctor. 3 words, no sentences. Next question. I would like for you to write down, think about a leader that inspires you or the leader you aspire to. What are the 3 words you would use to describe what inspires you or you aspire to with that leader? So hold on to that information. Let's see how it works out. What does credibility mean? The Collins Dictionary defines credibility as the ability to create trustworthiness. Essentially, it's about the quality of being trusted. I look at it as an academic from a process of reliability and validity. If you're a master's student or any postgraduate student, you know reliability and validity. It's really about expertise and trust. So I define credibility really as the ability to create trustworthiness. Isn't that important for leadership? Isn't that what you do when you're following a leader? Because you trust them? So a lot has been written about leadership, from Shaka Senzangakhona to Napoleon to Jesus and Mahatma Gandhi and all of that. So in the next 4 hours, oh, sorry, that's a different course. Leadership actually has been evolving quite a bit. So from that time that I'm sitting there 30 years ago studying, a lot of the conversation about competency-based approaches, around process-based approaches, to the work about that people like Warren Bennis, who's now talking about the inside of the leader and what the leaders are like inside, integrity, values, beliefs, to the work of Manfred Kertz-de-Vries, who really now talks about the leader on the couch and the psychoanalysis and the unconscious elements of leadership. It has been evolving to where now my colleague, Dr. Makadlela here, is talking about Ubuntu leadership. People like Malido Masome, a Ghanaian shaman, people like Mfundisi Lwabeng, who talks about Ubuntu. Leadership is essentially, if you hear nothing else out of this conversation, is the fact that leadership is coming back home. So part of my work as a researcher has also been to do a bit of a literature study, and in that literature study, I can't give you all of it, but what summarizes that literature study is effectively the work by Min and Metzger that you see there, that says your credibility really lies on being reliable in terms of the promises. Are you keeping your promises? 2, are you knowledgeable and skillful in terms of what you're doing? Would you be led by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing? 3, as a practitioner, are you making false representations? This actually reminds me of my mother. Every time, one of the lessons I will always remember about her, she's still alive, by the way, but it was a long time ago, I was still a kid, says, Monga Wanaka, you know, the thing about the truth is you never have to believe, you never have to remember what you said the last time. And I think that's kind of what it talks about there. And then finally, credibility, according to Min and Metzger, also then talks about having to be open and let people know where you come from. Have you ever walked out of a relationship and you go like, what was happening there actually? So as I'm building up to this thing, I would like for you to go out with one single idea out of this conversation. Leadership, there are actually 8 billion styles of leadership. Because in my research, what essentially came out was that your personhood, Ubuntu Bako, is actually your leadership style. And I'll show you just now. So this is a piece of information that essentially came as one of the analysis in terms of that, all of that data that I just shared, just to show you how it got split, because I'm going to share 8 elements, and I'm going to do it very quickly. I'm going to share 8 elements that if you start putting them together, you can work with levers to decide on your leadership style. It's not sitting in a book somewhere in INSEAD or in some book in Harvard or UNISA or Stellenbosch. You can find it if you want. First thing that came out of that thing is about your skill. What is it that you can do better than 80% of the people in this room? If you can figure that out, that immediately when I ask you to come stand on this stage and do it, what is it that you can do? You're already starting your journey. The second thing that came out of that research was essentially about knowledge. Oprah Winfrey has something on her own magazine that says, what do you know for sure? If I woke you up in the middle of the night and I asked you to come and do a presentation, 125,000 Rand for 30 minutes, what would you talk about that you know so well you don't have to do research? Now, the scary thing about my research is that that's only 17% of the picture. And we go around hiring people based on their skills and their knowledge. Some don't even know what they are. The next thing that actually came out, and probably the most important thing, because it was the biggest element around the conversation about leadership, was your attributes. But there were 4 particular attributes that essentially came out quite strongly. The first one was values. What is it that you hold so dear? What is it that you believe in? What is it that, because values is the space we go to judge people. Values are the spaces we go to decide on making very difficult decisions. But my research on values that's very interesting is that, because I'm busy with it now for the last 4 or so years, indicate that only 18% in any room will actually make the same difficult decision that you make. So what does that mean about how we tend to judge people? And as a leader, what does it mean about how you show up thinking your values are the only important values? Chances are 82% of the people in the room don't share your values. The second thing that essentially came out there was about passion, attitude. So attitude here is not about having a bad attitude or a good attitude, it's already inclusive. It's really about what is it that you're so passionate about. The magic actually of leadership lies in how people are actually pulled by your passion. Does it feel like I'm enjoying doing this conversation? Such that when now somebody sees it, they push you forward, they thrust you into leadership. Look around, check, make your next time. The places where people are just pushing you, that's the magic of leadership. That's what psychoanalytic scholars call valence. I don't have enough time to talk about it, but it's the magic of leadership. And every one of us has a valence. What do you have a valence for? Because you can use that to lead with ease. Motivation, I've studied about 23 or so motivational theories, but I still go back to Maslow. Somebody mentioned Maslow earlier. And if you have social self-esteem needs, they need to be recognized. And I have physiological needs. I need to put food in my fridge. I'm not going to be listening to you talk to me about success, because success for me means putting food in the fridge. So the work of leadership really is about understanding what is the motivational orientation of the people that you're working with, so that you can be able to do what I call complementarity of complementarity of motives, and be able to complement the motives, because right there, you can influence me. And lastly, personality. And personality is not about, hey, look at me. No, personality is really about how do you do stuff. How do you go into a default in how you do stuff? And regardless of what theory you use for personality, Myers-Briggs, for example, says there's 16 types of personalities, which means you are one. Already there's a 15-to-1 chance that the person that you're going to be dealing with next, you're going to offend. If you're using the insights technology, which has a Jungian background into it, chances are there's 72 2 to 1 chances that you're going to be wrong in how you do things compared to me. Doesn't it make sense then for me to have to find out how you do things and let me tell you how I do things so that we can figure out how to lead together? That's the most important part, as I think, for me, and that's mostly the difficult conversations that we have. I'm running out of time, but one of the things that also came out is the issue of results. As Africans, we are taught to be humble. And what I have learned most of the time is that we don't talk about results when it matters. As a result, if I'm sitting having coffee outside and I walk up to you and say, you know, I initiated cell phone banking in this country in 1999, you're probably going to go like, yeah, and? But turn that situation around. We are sitting in a boardroom. We're talking about designing a technology solution. And I say, you know, I initiated cell phone banking in this country in 1999. How are you going to respond? Yes, please come along. Come and help us. So verily, verily, I say unto you, it's important to own your results. You're not bragging if your results are about helping a cause and helping and contributing to what it is. Ask yourself, if I'm saying this, am I bragging or is it helping? If people haven't asked you, probably you're bragging. And it's also important to think about the results of the future, because I find that many leaders are struggling quite a bit with the whole idea around how do we be very precise and very specific about how to deliver to others. So be very specific, be very clear. My research shows that that's how you're actually going to get the stuff. And the last piece, and I'm just about to wrap up, is purpose. What is it that you feel God is here has put you here to do? If you don't believe in God, what do you feel your skills, knowledge, attributes are contributing to in the bigger scheme of things? My research seems to show that people seem to trust leaders who look like they're doing this not just as a good idea, but because it feels like it's contributing to something much bigger than themselves. So, from situational leadership with Haitian Blanchard to the work of Warren Bennis and talking about integrity and all of that, magnanimity and openness, you can start seeing a move towards people talking, Bill Posner and Kozas here, talking about modeling the way. Leadership is about showing direction. You start realizing when you include the work of Cashman, talking about presenting authentically, realizing authentically, and talking authentically, that leadership is actually coming back home to Ubuntu Bako, which essentially means how you show up should be how you lead. But do you know who you are? Do you know any of those 8 elements? If there was only one value, if there was only one skill, if there was only one of any of the 8 elements only in the whole world, and you know that there isn't, right? There's not one skill, there's not one, yeah? There's 40,320 ways to be able to mix that up. That's already complex. Now imagine all the values, all the beliefs, all the attitudes that are existing. Now, I ask you, are you leading as a 1 in 8 billion leader? Because nobody's like you. My name is Monges Makalima. My work is to evoke excellence in others. I'm an African, I'm a leader, and I'm an elder. And I thank you.